We have 5 individuals here who are quite unique. They come from very varied backgrounds, and they've all have a passion for the industry. And I'd like to start it off with Chef Richard Bradford, who is one of the leading paleo chefs in the U.S. And the first question I really want to ask, I want you to introduce yourselves, and then I want you to tell us what was the hook, what was the inertia that pulled you into the grass-fed ancestral diet eating experience. And I think you're going to come at this from a couple different directions. We have a distributor down here on the left, and I've already talked to Paul and said, tell us why you were drawn into it from a business standpoint. Richard, go ahead.
Thank you, John. Again, my name is Richard Bradford. I own a company called RSB Foods, and we have a focus on the paleo diet, and our website is premadepaleo.com. So it's a very convenient start to our business about 3 years ago. I was the test dummy for us, and it changed my life completely, my health, and in about 3 months I had such a significant change. I had a catering business that I ran for 7 years prior, and I honestly felt that I was poisoning my customers if I wasn't feeding them this kind of food plan. And that was really, no coincidence. That's what I gravitated to the grass-fed, industry with. I mean, finding, the best and healthiest and truly wholesome meats is the baseline for the paleo lifestyle. And so that's how I found myself, being a consumer of it and, buying a whole lot and making it taste really good.
My name's Danielle. I am a personal trainer at Equinox Fitness Club up in Connecticut. I also compete in figure and new power lifter. My experience with meat or grass-fed beef would be, I'm Brazilian and I came from Brazil 15 years ago, and back when I lived there, the food was very naturally raised. And when we moved here to the United States, I just remember, I was just saying that I remember my mom cooking and just putting so much seasoning into the food just to bring out that flavor. And it was impossible, no matter how much seasoning she put in there, it was impossible for us to have that natural, wholesome taste that we used to have back home. And it wasn't until I started competing in figure where I started eating cleaner, even though I hate that term, but it's something that most of us are not familiar with. And it wasn't until then that I started eating this way and started eating grass-fed beef, and that flavor, I tasted it. And it was the same thing from home, and it was great. And being in figure, my calories are very limited when I get close to competition. So I'm gonna make sure those calories count, and I'm gonna make sure it tastes good. So that's my experience.
My name's Carl Higbie. I did 9 years as a Navy SEAL, and now I also work for Equinox. My experience with grass-fed beef, actually I met John about 8 years ago, and he made the economically poor decision to give me a discount on his meats. And so I had reached a plateau in lifting. I also do non-competitive powerlifting, just personal favorite. So I'd reached a plateau on deadlifting, and John said, well, look, integrate this, try that. So I did, and within 4 months I had added a little over 100 pounds to my deadlift without changing any of my training program, just solely the beef aspect of it. So that was the major turning point for me. But I think this is something going on. I've continued to use, and I've continued to make the gains, and I've never plateaued the same as I had when I was eating traditional meats. So that's my story.
My name is Paul Armbrust. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Premier Proteins. I don't power lift, as you can probably tell. Premier Proteins, we got into the grass-fed. It was actually our customers that asked us about it, and our customers that pushed it. Our main programs are Wagyu beef and Brookshire hog, so very high-end meats. But we have a huge, so many customers and so many of our high-end restaurants and high-end grocery stores. They just kept asking us for, do you guys have grass-fed? Do you guys have grass-fed? So obviously we took the time to explore and found the right grass-fed with the right flavor profile and the right genetics in it and we've expanded our market considerably, about quadrupled the last 2 years. So it's a great business to be in.
Hi, my name is Leslie Moore. I own a company called Farmer Girl Meats. I am a product marketer by training. I came from corporate America into this category, but I am also a farmer girl and a mother of 3 young children. So I grew up eating farm fresh food. I actually can't taste, grass-fed beef just tastes like beef to me because that's really what I grew up eating. So what brought me back into the category was more so that I have these 3 small children, and in my mind it's a superfood and it's not being used enough. It's not being used enough to feed our children or people who really need it. So we got into this business, and it's been great. It's been very gratifying, very, very gratifying.
The next question is kind of a trick question. I want you to answer in 2 words. This will be a short test. In what 2 words can you describe what you appreciate most about the product to the producers in this audience? What you have a unique opportunity. What we try to do here is bring in consumers from varied backgrounds, varied parts of the U.S. And for a lot of people in this room, marketing is not your favorite forte. Production's a lot more fun. That's probably 90% of this audience. But what I want you to hear as the producers of this product, from consumers of this product, from a chef, from a gal that grew up in Brazil eating 100% grass-fed beef, to Carl Higbie, who's had an extremely competitive physical fitness endurance contest for 8 or 9 years with the Navy SEAL program, whose survival goes to the fittest and to the strongest, and to Paul over here, who's getting nibbles from industry, and the same thing in our office. 10 years ago, the phone never rang from a restaurant, or rarely rang from independent to grocery stores and those sort of folks. And now in the last 5 years, the pendulum has swung, and everybody's trying to catch up with the bandwagon. So, and Leslie over here comes from a farm background, lives in the suburbs of St. Louis, represents a real high percentage of consumers that from coast to coast. And basically on our website, our #1 state for sales is California. That's all population density, followed by Florida and New York. And this is demographics. And most of the people, a lot of the people that we're going to sell to, and I admire Greg Judy, he sells within 15 miles of his back door. He's my favorite model here. But anyway, in 2 words, I want you to tell us what makes grass-fed beef go wild to your imagination. If you could describe it in 2 words, Leslie, you get to start.
Go wild in my imagination, is what you said. I think as a consumer, what I appreciate in product marketing, we always say, how does something make you feel? How does a product make you feel? And I think grass-fed beef makes me feel basically like a really awesome mom. It's kind of like I'm going that like 1/100th mile, and makes me feel actually good about what I'm feeding my kids. It also actually makes me feel strong. We call it strong meat in our family because of the product attributes, and because I want to teach my kids that they don't need to be skinny, they need to be strong. So.
Very good.
2 words, huh?
You can cheat a little bit.
Flavor and profile.
Very good.
I'll keep it simple. Grass-fed. Simply enough. Why would I want to feed? If I can't digest corn, why would I want to eat something that's spent its whole life digesting corn? So it's obviously derived from what we're naturally meant to have, and we're not meant to have corn. So that's it.
I would have to say flavor, and just because of my background, nostalgia brings me back home.
I would have two sets of 2. First would be happy meat, and the other would be earth passion.
Outstanding. The next question is going to be easier. And I really like the word passion. I think everybody in this room, you know, passion is what drives most of us for what we do and how we do it. The next question doesn't have a right or wrong answer. Everybody in this room will have an opinion on this, and we have varied backgrounds here coming at this from a different direction. What percentage of the U.S. customer base will this industry reach by 2030, which is only 16 years away? And I'm thinking in terms of paradigms. Paradigms are normally 20-year events, and I think the paradigm shifted with Food Inc. That's when I really saw, I think, this trend started. I mean, we became mainstream when that actually went viral. So I'll start with Carl this time, right in the middle. We'll give Carl the middle shot, and then we'll work around.
As far as shifting the paradigm of grain-fed to grass-fed beef, I think being in the fitness industry, working at Equinox, we see people all the time, what should I eat, what should I eat? What's grass-fed, what's grain-fed, what's good, what's bad? I see a lot more people willing to come. I mean, most people nowadays are making, you know, nutritional decisions with their wallet, and but recently people have started to come out of that shell and said, hey, this is a beneficial thing for me to do for me and my family. It's okay to pay the extra couple bucks. And as corn gets more expensive, and I'm sure everybody in this room is familiar with Monsanto, it's creating a lot of discontent on people and where their meat is coming from and what their meat is being fed. So I see a distinct paradigm shifting back to the natural thing. People want to be more, I guess, earthy would be the term, without the hybrid in it, the hybrid cars. So people want to be a part of something that's a lot more healthy, and they're willing to pay the extra dollar for it now more than ever.
I think, to put a number on it, probably 15% is probably what it is. I think the main thing that's there's going to be a lot more demand. This is something we know we're seeing now and starting to really go. There'll be a lot more demand, and it's going to be up to the folks in this room. It's going to be more of a production and a supply side issue. And you know, there are obviously some economic issues of what people can afford to pay. I mean, because it is more, but you know, that's what our market is. That's what we do every day. So we're very in tune with the Wagyu and the grass fed and the Brookshire hogs. And right now, I would say, you know, we're talking at 6 to 7% right now. The market is probably of the higher cost, higher end product. If you put the grass fed in there, the potential we see, and what kind of the market and the folks in our market we deal with on a day to day is probably that 15%. You know, they talk up to 25% within 50 years. Is kind of 40 to 50 years. So in your time frame, probably about 15%.
I'm going to say 20%. I think we can look at other categories that are value-based. There's a precedent and a historical trend, so we can look at organic dairy. They kind of paved the path 15 to 20 years ago, and now the penetration in that category is 20 to 25%. So we're just at the beginning of where they were, perhaps, however many years ago. But I'd say 20 based on that.
I honestly can't give an educated guess as far as what number it will be. I would just have to say that I agree with Carl, where you're seeing a lot more people put more significance in what it is that they're taking in regardless of the price. I think, you know, obesity is such a huge epidemic now in the United States, and I think people are starting to fight against it. So it's a good move. It's definitely going in the right direction, I think.
I'm going to say a little curve busting on the number. I'm going to actually shoot as high as 40%. My belief is, you know, just with parents that are in their 70s now, you know, kind of at the beginning of the baby boom, we have a whole lot of people, a much larger portion of this country that's seen and suffering from illnesses that are coming from the food that they're eating. And the writing is on the wall, and they're becoming much more aware of it. You know, when I started in what I do, they thought I was nuts. And 3 years later, they're all in. And I mean, it didn't really take any convincing on my end, because they're not going to listen to their son. They're going to listen to their doctors. They're going to listen to other people that are, dealing with it in the same way. We're also, benefiting from the social media space that is really, it's a word of mouth on steroids. And, getting the word out and getting that message across is a lot easier than it has been, and it's moving at lightning pace. So I'm very bullish on the future, and I hope my 40% is on the low end.
While we're on the subject, Chef Bradford, you may not want to name your enterprise, but just mention that you got about your professional sports connection and tell the audience how that came about. How did they find you?
I work with a professional sports team, and I actually provide meals to to a couple of their Bush League teams, and what their feeling is, and they had bought in completely to their team MD nutritionist, who believed that they needed to be eating this kind of food to have optimal performance for their athletes. And this is something that's in its incubation because they didn't bring it right to their top players that have lived in a different way and have a little bit more of a, shall we say, prima donna way about them, and they're just a little harder to convince. But they're embedding it on the ground level, and they are investing in these working machines that they are looking forward to having the next generation of success with their organization.
Which is very interesting. Our company has worked with a professional football team for the last 4 years, one of the NFL teams, and the trainer came to me about 6 years ago, who was a weightlifter. He's a strength coach, and he understood the value of omega-3 and CLA, and it took us 2 years to convince the upper level management that this was a good investment. And 4 years later, we shipped them a case and a half of strip loins a week, and I forget how many hamburger patties, 80 pounds of beef patties a week. But they are so impressed with this that they actually shipped that product. We actually shipped to all the away football games, we shipped to hotels, and they want that crew on that product. They see fewer injuries, they see quicker recovery, and they track all that. It's you're paying these people a tremendous amount of money, and they want to see them stay healthy. So what's really fascinating is as we've touched senior citizens, trying to live longer and a healthier lifestyle at 80 plus. We've got the soccer moms, and sadly, as we heard this morning, we have a lot of health issues in this country, and people with autoimmune diseases are searching for us. So the beauty of what we do is we really reach everybody, anybody that eats, and that's the beauty of every morning we get out of bed. It's good for the land, good for the cattle, good for the rural community, and good for our own families. The next question, I want our participants here to, based on their level of experience and their knowledge, what are 2 or 3 key issues that you want the grass-fed industry to focus on in the production of these meats as it applies to your lifestyle and peers you will promote the product to? So if you're trying to promote this product to fellow members of the chef community, the fitness industry, special forces warriors, fellow distributors, and soccer moms, what are the 2 or 3 things you want us to focus on, possibly in future grass-fed exchange gatherings, to spread the news or spread the message on?
Who wants to start on that?
Yeah.
Hammer away.
I say this being part of the industry as a mom and consumer and whatnot. Please focus on processing. And we need more capabilities to do allergen-free products and be able to guarantee that to our consumers. We're inundated with individuals who have kids with allergies, et cetera, and our issue comes not in the beef, but in the processing. We need more formality around that and more of a wave, a group approach to it, because it's a huge consumer base, and all the data today showed it's growing. And that in of itself is a distinct consumer segment that you could take. But a big gap there is on the processing, because we can do everything in the field, wonderful, but we have to come together as a group and figure out how do we get the processing to match the product you're making in the field.
I can't speak too much to the processing. I'm the type of guy who rip its horns off, wipe its rear, and throw it on my plate, and I'll eat it. But I ran for Congress this last year, this last election cycle. I lost in the primary, and one of the big things that we focused on was messaging. And I think that's one of the big things that hinders this industry from growing, which is the grass-fed industry or the free-range industry. The message is not there. People don't understand how much more beneficial this is, and I can tell every one of my clients who tells every one of their friends, and you've hit a fraction of a percent of a small region. Imaging, the way it's put on, I know I've been on Fox News with John quite a few years ago, but people don't understand how beneficial this is for you. And you talk to these professional football teams, professional sports teams, if you can help use these guys to get the message out, because kids listen to this. Kids take these people by gospel. LeBron James is an idiot, but everybody listens to him. So if you can get these professional athletes that are eating your product to speak to that, whether it's in a blog or an advertisement, I know that their advertisement fees are astronomical, but knowledge. We need to get the public to understand how much better this is for, and let people experience it and make examples of people. From a marketing standpoint, if you were to feed somebody this for a year, it would cost you a minimal amount, and you put a commercial out about them, that's a very inexpensive case study for them to have this transformation. So I think if you can get to the public, reach out, especially through social media now, local news channels will be, I mean, if you say, I'm gonna bring a bunch of stuff here and I'm gonna barbecue on your set, they need people to fill that airtime, they will do it. You reach out to ABC, NBC, especially Fox News, because I'm a Fox News contributor. So, if you reach out to these folks, they will put you on air, and we will educate my generation.
Yeah, I mean, I am hearing what Carl's saying, and this is exactly what I'm thinking is, give the message, tell your story. I mean, whether or not it's, I had a couple conversations with folks that are, putting kitchens in their processing plants or on their farms. I mean, a chef would kill to go on a farm and be able to, work with meat that's coming right from the, outside, and get that on video, show it. I mean, that way we can tell the story. That's really, how you could help, get this across. And there's that soul, there's that passion that's going to come through, and people will, it's going to register with them, and they're going to, actually support it.
I want to stop right there a second. Richard, keep the mic. I want you to give the audience, first of all, people may not realize this, the first farm that Richard Bradford ever set foot on was Greg Judy's farm on Wednesday afternoon. Tell us about that experience, just from a complete novice who could do anything with a piece of beef from the carcass on. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, I was fortunate, the first hour of the experience was actually listening to Greg and tell about what he does there. And I never felt more connected with it, with the food that I'm preparing, because there is as much care, if not more, from the soil to that harvested animal than what I'm putting into it to get it to the plate. And I finally had that aha moment when I was out there. And as I, put a bunch of dirt over the manure that I stepped into on my shoes, I was like, I knew this was going to happen while I was here, but I just had only a smile on my face, and and then follow up with the compost tea, and I started, my entrepreneurial mind started going. I mean, immediately. I come from I want you to make more. I mean, my request is to make more because I want to sell more of it. I want to get it to more mouths, and more happiness and more health.
Yeah, I'll kind of reiterate what these guys are saying. The story behind the producers to the consumers is very strong, very strong. One thing that was very beneficial is we always get people asking, prove it. How do we know this is grass-fed? This tastes too good to be grass-fed, because they've had bad experiences with that in the past. And so, keeping your paperwork, the traceability, the verification, those type of things are very, very important to the sellers of the product in order to push the product and get it going. And from a different life of mine, I used to work for Farmland Industries, and we had an organic bakery that we used, and we were able to trace the actual grain all the way through the flour, or to the flour mill, to the bakery, to the bread that we put out. It was like a sourdough and some multi-grain breads we did. And we were able to put a code on that loaf of bread that they could type in, go to a website and type it in. You know, now you can just scan the little thing, it would take you right there, but that was the olden days. But they could put that, and they could actually get the story of the producers and see the picture of the producers on their farms, and that connection is so very strong. I mean, it just sucks you in, and they want that. That's what consumers need and what they really want.
I would just say more distribution, wider distribution. I know that a lot of my clients, I also consult online, and a lot of my clients are all over the United States. And when I say grass-fed, they just seem to have a hard time finding it. So I would just maybe just try to broaden out the distribution.
To piggyback on that also, distribute, like she was saying, distribution is key. And if we can get that knowledge out there, people will know to ask for it. Tell your consumers, ask for this stuff, because you go to Harris Teeter is about the only place around me, or Whole Foods, that carries this stuff, and there's 30 different grocery store chains. So if you tell your people, ask for this stuff in the store, ask for my product specifically, that if enough people ask, that supermarket is going to say, oh man, we need to start carrying this stuff.
The next question goes back into an area that I'm sorry. The next question pertains to myths in the beef business. And I stumbled around New York City with a retired meat broker back in 2007 and early 8. And every kitchen that we walked into, they demanded fresh, and they demanded well-marbled beef. And I tried to explain to them that grass-fed beef has got photolipids. Photolipids come from sunshine and green grass. And the author, Mr. Steak, that wrote the best-selling book and entertained us as a banquet speaker 3 years ago, that was a wow moment when he explained photolipids. It's not that marbling you see, it's that intermuscular lipid that's almost invisible, gives it the taste. And so we have 5 consumers up here, and I'm just curious, especially Chef Bradford, who came out of the Culinary Institute of America, professional background. Considering marbling, explain to us how you got past that, because most people think that grass-fed should be as well marbled as a choice or prime steer. And for those of you that saw the presentation in the last exercise, I was even surprised. I thought the small steer would have pretty good marbling, and I was surprised the large frame animal actually showed more marbling. So marbling's a little bit of a mystery. But did you have any personal hang-ups when it came to, and I don't think Danielle did, because she knows what grass-fed beef looks like from a small child. But the other 4 members of the panel, any comments about marbling? And this is part of marketing as well.
I would say that, you know, your comparison of grass-fed to, grass-fed, grass-finished versus corn-finished is, there's really a night and day in the flavor and what you're getting out of it from that profile. Now that the fact that you're going to have less marbling and it's going to be a different expectation, I mean, a little bit more care needs to be taken in cooking it, but I really haven't seen a big pushback. I think that it's more about people's expectations of how beef needs to taste, and I've heard that I've heard things like grass-fed beef doesn't have as much flavor, and I mean I just wonder if they have a cold, but because it's kind of counterintuitive based on my experience, but the leaning towards looking for lean meat, is generally, gives it a certain popularity to, a less apparent marbling on the outside of the steak and, and on the interior, it's just found to be a higher quality. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, I'll be honest, I have no idea what a photolipid is, but if John says it's good, it's got to be good. And the only person more honest than Abe Lincoln. So, I don't know much about the molecular or actual construction of the meat itself, but I do know that from personal experience, there is a night and day difference. And I'd be happy to reach out to any of your consumers to tell them that. I have combat experience, dealing with this stuff. So it literally saved my ass. So if that photolipids are the reason or good marbling, so be it.
We deal day to day with meatheads. We deal with the guys in the market who are buying the meat, and the buyers for the grocery stores, the restaurant chains, they know what the marbling. They know it's not going to be as highly marbled on the grass-fed, and that's why I said earlier the flavor profile. I mean, they're really concerned about that flavor profile, and they're really concerned about that and the consistency. We also sell Wagyu, so that's, we sell marmalade on that side. But as far as the professional buyers, the professional folks in the meat industry who are buying for their consumers, they don't expect huge marbling, and it's all about the flavor profile. They don't really pay a lot of attention to that. In fact, if you have a lot of marbling in it, they actually question the quality more so than hardly any marbling at all. So.
I would say, as just a consumer, it's basically what I grew up eating. It doesn't affect me at all, and I would find a highly marbled piece of meat, I probably wouldn't like it. Working with my consumers, I have never once heard somebody say something about marbling, and I would actually suggest that it is an antiquated product attribute of beef. It comes from history, and I think if we did research with the consumer base, it would show that in terms of product attributes, it's probably very low, because that's not why people are coming into this category in the first place. So then to go and judge a piece of meat on a product attribute that consumers don't care about, or is lower on the priority list, so we don't worry about it.
And I tend to agree with Leslie. It's those restaurant chefs, in those major cities. That's where the rub comes from. The average consumer. And if you think back to the grass-fed industry, our grandparents, even our parents, in my case, my parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, we ate grass-fed beef in this country exclusively up to a year or two after World War II, when we had a surplus of nitrogen from ammonium nitrate sitting around that went out on ag land that produced corn. We doubled the corn yield, and then land-grant university decided it'd be great to feed the cattle to 22 pounds a day. And so if you go back in our family trees, we didn't know what marbling was until probably the mid-1960s, and that was one of the tools that was used to sell the new product. So we've come full circle, and we're back where we started. Danielle, go ahead.
I would just say my experience. The meat that I've had here compared to the meat that I've had in Brazil, when I first moved here, it was almost grainy. It didn't feel whole until I started having the grass-fed beef, and that's I don't know if the marbling. I honestly can't say that I inspect the meat when I buy it. As long as it's grass-fed, for me, it's fine, and it's what tastes best, in my opinion. So I'm literally just going through what feels good when I eat. So that's just where I'm coming from. Very good.
And while Danielle has got the mic, the figure fitness industry and bodybuilding industries, 15 years ago, beef would have been taboo, beef with a lot of fat in it. And I'm just curious, what percentage of the industry today do you think has actually figured this out? The CLA actually doesn't really solid muscle.
In the bodybuilding world, I would probably say 100%.
Okay.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely. You will not see one competitor who does not include beef at least, and I'm being conservative here for those less educated bodybuilders who don't have beef at least twice a week. Most will have it 4 to 5 times. At least that's what I do, that's what everyone in my team does and the teams around me. So it's a huge staple in our diet, huge.
This follows over into Carl from the Special Forces standpoint. You guys travel to faraway places and get stranded out in the wilds for days at a time. And one of the things we're trying to perfect is like a shelf-stable, high-fat, high-protein. You think that could be pushed into the military at some point if we met all the specs?
Well, you're a conservative American, so the IRS will make sure you never get any sort of DoD contracts. But realistically, when we go overseas, it is the lowest bidder. So the likelihoods of getting any quality beef whatsoever is 0. We overseas when we were I was in Baghdad in 2007 for 9 months, and then Fallujah in 2009 for another 9 months. And there was a drastic decline of your health because of the diet over there. A lot of guys now are eating MREs 2 meals a day, which are these meals ready to eat, and they're coming back diabetic. Some of them have major health problems, and the fact of the matter is a lot of the places we go, you can't maintain a healthy diet, so we are eating the power bars, protein bars, and essentially stuff that doesn't expire, which is not good for you. Because sometimes it sits on a 130-degree tarmac for 3 months until we can get it. So if you were able to create some sort of affordable, less expensive than a $3 Cliff Bar or something like that, and pitch it properly to the military, properly to the DoD, there is a chance they may pick it up. But when it comes down to it, they care less about the soldier than they do about the bottom line, and it's very unfortunate.
What about jerky?
A jerky would be good, but again, it's going to come down to the bottom line. It's really unfortunate, but it would have to be such an astronomical pitch. We're not a for-profit organization like a professional football team or what have you. They're interested in getting the troops fed, and they're not necessarily caring what they eat and you watch the health decline, especially with the Army platoons that are 16 months deployed with no break in a remote area of Iraq, Afghanistan, and soon to be Iran. But it's bad. So if you could come up with something like that with the beef,
what about a study on performance? I keep thinking, wouldn't your performance as a military person go down?
Right, and the performance, she's talking about performance as a military personnel. The performance overseas does go down. We run and gun 7 days a week for 9 months straight. The problem is, again, the military is so uninterested in any type of new change. For instance, our night vision is 14 years behind what the CIA has. All right, we shop at the same store. We just have to go through 19 approval processes to get it. And that's just the way the military works. It's the DMV with nuclear submarines. So to get something like this to pass, you would have to have an approval process, longer than the national debt. So no matter what case study there is, they've tried to implement protein powders for us, and it's taken 5 years to approve one Metrex protein powder, which is far inferior to many of the other protein powders that are on the market, but they dumped enough money into the contract to essentially buy their way into it. So the likelihood of it happening, honestly, is very low, unless you could provide some astounding evidence that this is going to make them save more money on injuries later down the line, which is a 20, 30-year study. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Why couldn't you make the generals eat what you eat?
That's not how it works.
Generals should eat what you eat.
Yeah, well, do as I say, not as I do is the motto, generally from the top brass. I wrote a book on active duty, highly critical of the current administration, and was one of 2 people ever, active duty service members, to sue the military and win my First Amendment rights. And that's what it is. The people up top don't necessarily believe in what is best for my soldier. They believe in a large bureaucratic machine like the DMV. And unfortunately, I'm not saying that the generals aren't sincere people, but their pressure is not on the individual soldier. Their pressure is on the mission at hand, and they believe that we are, the United States soldier is the most lethal weapon ever created. They'll survive. They'll do fine. And the fact of the matter is, okay, maybe we can perform just enough, but think if we perform that much better, which would cut down the length and severity of each conflict, returning more of our sons and daughters home. This is a massive media pitch that would take, billions of dollars and untold research, and you'd have to reach somebody at State Department level, White House level. It could not come from within the DoD. It would have to come from above the DoD in order to implement something like this. That's just how it works.
Well, I sat here listening to this conversation, and we all in the room have to applaud Carl's patriotism. It would be kind of intriguing, if we could take a small percentage off, that'd be a check off, and we could feed the nation's warriors a much better diet. I mean, I don't think anybody in the room with NCBA and involved, it'd be interesting. Just got a question right here.
I've got a question for you. Unfortunately, I don't think we have enough farmers to feed the U.S. Military, which is a really important point. I think that we talk about decreasing cattle numbers, so in order to meet the demand we're talking about, we need more farmers. I think we need to have sort of a consumer advocacy piece for new producers and how to get this thing going. My question actually is kind of two parts. I'm wondering what you see as the biggest limitations for the farm to fork movement from the consumer perspective, and what you think is perhaps the most significant lost opportunity for producers right now as part of this movement specifically.
Is that for specifically me or for the entire panel? Okay. Well, someone welcome to take this one.
Unfortunately, you see a lot. I know you all know this, but everybody wants the best product, wants the grass-fed. We want this, but it still comes down for most of the consumers. It ends up coming down to price and the cost. I mean, from our side, we've been in some great contracts with some folks, and we've lost a lot of business to Australia, to New Zealand, to Ecuador, on grass-fed specifically too, and because they can get it, and then they'll be the first to admit quality is not 50% of what you guys are going to provide. However, cash is king, and their sales start going down, and people aren't still. They say and they want. I mean, 80% of the consumers say they want the best quality, the best health benefits, but when it comes down to forking over that cash, only about 20% of those folks will stay true to what their wallet will stay true to what their heart wants, and that's probably the biggest thing that we run into all the time.
I think a little bit opposite, coming from the retail side, direct to consumer, that the biggest limitation is actually sometimes ourselves, and that it's interesting listening to the conference on all the amazing things that you producers are doing in the field, et cetera, that really decommoditize, right? So they're differentiating, and that's how you capture value in the marketplace. But then when we get to the marketplace, we fall back and treat it like a commodity again, meaning comparing ourselves to other commodity beef and how that is sold. And I deeply, deeply feel that is not the right way to tackle it, but rather to tackle it from a true idea of here's a differentiated product, and we're going to sell it that way, and we're going to claim the pricing. And to me, I always say what's going on here is like producing the Louis Vuitton of beef. Really, it's the highest quality product you can get. But if I was making Louis Vuitton, I would not compare my pricing to a bag coming from Walmart. These are different categories. So in a way, we have to approach the marketplace like we truly are. And there are other categories that do that. Coffee, wine. They have essentially decommoditized themselves through marketing, et cetera, and capturing the price, claiming their price point. And I would argue we shouldn't have those 80% of customers because they're probably not the right fit perhaps that's almost a commodity. It's not a commodity, it's not ubiquitous. So they say, I think that 20%, that 80% of your revenue comes from 20% of your customers. And I think it's a very similar phenomenon. Let's go after those 20%, decommoditize, own what you are, and claim your price point instead of trying to compete with a commodity mentality, because it's not a commodity anymore.
I'll follow with that. We don't try to compete on a commodity basis. I mean, obviously we know the spectacular product we have, and we do. So when I'm talking about the 100% I was talking about is that 20%. The telltales on things I shouldn't. We had contracts, we were supplying Trader Joe's and Whole Foods. Those are supposed to be the high end, that's our target market. New Zealand, Australia, no U.S. anymore of the products.
That's not local anymore. It's a different need.
Right, but I'm saying the consumer out there says, I can go to Whole Foods and I can get this great product.
I think the point is the producer's never going to compete against, like, you as a middle person may compete against New Zealand, but we're never going to.
Right.
I was going to say that you as a middle person who's brokering or moving this product around may have to compete with New Zealand, but I'm never going to do that, and I never will.
Right.
So the point is, I guess, like, we're creating niche markets, and I think your point is well taken, that our customers are not going to trade in our product for a New Zealand land product.
Right.
They're actually avoiding that based on principle. And so I wonder, like, farm to fork would be different than grass-fed. And so I think we have to differentiate when we're creating markets for our farms. We're not just grass-fed. We are serving our local communities, our local areas. It could be statewide. But of course, obviously, you folks may have a broader, you're looking elsewhere. And so I guess I wonder for us as producers, I'd be curious to know sort of what type of sort of relationships you want to produce, what you want to have with producers, and what some of the limitations you think we might be facing, like what types of, are we unable to think out of the box in some areas? Like, how do we market and how do we move the product forward?
Yeah. Well, I'll throw a comparison on to the Wagyu market, the Kobe, American Kobe that we sell, and have spent 8 years, versus the 2 or 3 really growing it like we are with the grass-fed here. The key is we sell a program, so we are going to HEBs and the bigger chains, because that's where you're going to get the leverage to get the product for the producer. So we work strictly with co-ops, essentially, groups of producers on the beef and on the hog side, and try to get the genetics all the same or very similar, to get their feeding practices all the same or very similar, so we can go to a market and sell to a chain or a regional restaurant or a regional grocery store a consistent, high quality, high taste product. And so I think by sharing industry practices on the feeding, on your growing techniques and those things, and having it consistent over an area. So like all of our now, we used to have product, we had them in Texas, we had them in, from the East Coast, and we had them in the Dakotas and everywhere. Now we have all our producers in a very limited geographic area. I mean, they are all in northern Missouri, through Iowa, Minnesota, and Nebraska. So similar growing conditions, similar genetics, similar feeding practices, so that consistent product. So what we've been able to do is our business has grown not by, because we used to be local restaurants, 2 cases at a time here or there. We're delivering a pallet at a time to a chain. And it's all the same, all consistent, and it's all high-end stuff. But that consistency is the key. And going from the mom and pop is what we always call it. Our mom and pop mentality is, we need to, we want to, a monkey can sell tenderloin, right? But you got to sell the skirts, you got to sell the middle, you got to sell every piece of that animal. And to build that program you need a larger supply base. You need a large chain. You need something so you can sell every single. You can't survive on selling 1 or 2 cattle to a local restaurant in the course of a year.
But you can use your geography as a marketing tool.
Yes, and we do. Yes, absolutely.
I would also, so I would say directly to that is own the premium side when you're marketing your beef. Think of yourself as a craft beer. How does craft beer market itself? They talk about how it's handmade, batch made, small quantities. the idea of what it means to be a craft meat producer, and really an artisanal meat producer, if you think about it. There are these other, go to a fancy store and look at fancy chocolate, and look at the ways they talk about themselves. That's marketing, and I think there's real opportunity there to more approach it as, look at this artisanal craft product we have, and talk about it that way, because you're justifying the price point too. There are also the health benefits, but those are other ways to do it and to justify the money, the work, and the cost put into it. I think that's a huge opportunity, and again, other categories do it: wine, coffee, cheese, chocolate. Own being small, because it's a really good thing. Own being a craft operation, because it's a really good thing. One last thing, what I would love to see is a way, if you look at coffee and wine, what do they market on? Regionality, right, and flavor. So meaning, there's people here from Texas. I'm assuming, have a different grass profile than what we have in Kansas. So there could be opportunity that you could say, we've got different flavor profiles, and wham, just like coffee, you have regionality. Costa Rican, whatever, the different regionality. There's also seasonality. You have different grasses growing in different seasons. It's going to impart a different flavor. There's another opportunity to say, here's a different flavor profile based on the season. Those things exist, we just need to market them. And that's the definition of a premium product, really.
I'll play devil's advocate to that a little bit. I'm from Connecticut, so a lot of people, and it's the greater New York City area. People up there are generally a little bit more fragile, let's call them, and they don't want to know where the beef came from. If I ask, I hunt. My wife will not eat venison because she knows that I killed it. Okay.
She should eat it because
exactly. She should eat it, but the fact of the matter is, as a distributor or as the farming side of it, many people, probably close to 50% of the nation, don't want to know. Not that they don't care. They don't want to know where it came from. They just want to know that they have a steak on the grill on 4th of July.
They're not our customers, though. Yeah. That 50% can go.
No, but they are, and that's they really are, because where I'm from, you have a lot of the very foo-foo-y type of people that only eat grass-fed beef, that have never held a gun in their life, that have never been to a farm, that have never put on a pair of boots, but yet they only eat grass-fed beef. So it would be, like she was saying, you have to tread that line. Yes, this is where it comes from. We have a profile, we have a niche, but you'd have to draw a line somewhere and thread the needle. Personally, someone like me, I want to see it slaughtered, and I want to see it on my plate. Like I want to see the whole process. But you be very careful to market, the cow with a name to now it's your dinner. So some people are very, very fragile about that. And I think it's the thing. The other thing I wanted to address: do you find as farmers, distributors, whatever, do you find it difficult to get employees, to bring people who want to enter the industry? I mean, by a show of hands, is it difficult? Okay. Well, I know that I've served with a great deal of guys, and a lot of them come from farming families. One way, if you're interested in attracting the military employee, get in touch with your regional USO offices, there's something called a TAPS class, which is a separation class from the military, and offer to say, hey, I'd like to be a representative teaching at this TAPS class. I have a farm, I have a distributor, I want military people. And if you call your local military reps, they will put you in front of 500 guys that are getting out of the military in the next 20 days looking for a job. And it's a great avenue to hire, leaders, innovative people that will get the job done. So if you're finding yourself falling short on trying to get people to work for you, and people who honestly want to work hard, that is one way you could expand on that.
I want to stop Carl there for a second. Does the Wounded Warrior Network fit into that complex? Because we're actually working with a chicken producer in Arkansas, and those are Wounded Warriors. A network there. Are those two the same, or are you got separate entities?
Wounded Warriors is a private organization. It's not affiliated with the military. They do work with the military, but they do that. There's a number of veteran employment companies out there. If you go online and search veteran employment, you're going to see 30 pages on Google of companies that do this. They're just recruiters for military, and obviously they're for profit or something, but they do really harness that military that military clientele. And if you want to call wounded warriors, things like that, the problem is most of them are affiliated with Wounded Warriors because they are to some degree disabled. Being on a farm with no legs is very difficult, and it's not meant to be a joke. It's very serious. So if you do affiliate with them, there are lots of guys that are maybe not as physically injured that would love that job. But I think the recruiting office is getting in touch with. If you look up TAPS class, a TAPPS, they are the military organization within the DoD that teaches people how to transition from military life to civilian life, and they often bring in people saying, I own a telecommunications company. Now, a guy who's been gunslinging for 10 years doesn't want to sit behind something calling people for beauty cream. So if you were like, hey, I'm a farmer, and I work from dawn till dusk every day, work hard, and then don't get paid nearly what the corporate world does, but I love my job and I want you're going to get a lot more traction than the telemarketers.
Very good. Anybody else want to follow up on the initial question that came over here? Chef Bradford, was it on that one?
I don't remember the initial questions.
Okay, I've got a question right back.
Thank you. This is more of a statement or whatever instead of a question, but in a way it's a way that maybe we can promote whatever the age of the animal is for meat, for whatever. Right now everything is those young animals, but fortunately I read a book from Colonel Dodge on the Kansas Plains, and he said the Indians had over 500 different ways to prepare buffalo meat. They weren't French culinaries. So then you start studying indigenous peoples. I was fortunate to be in the backcountry of Yellowstone for 30 years, where you can see what predators eat. And you kind of, once in a while, you find some good stuff. And when we market, for just to give an example, all of our mature males, the 8 to 12-year-olds, even though we raise buffalo to be the same, they go to all of our performance athletes, the mixed martial arts, the triathletes, Mr. Iowas, because you get the most power and the most performance, the same as what indigenous people have. A growing body cannot concentrate nutrients. So your mature animals that everybody's selling as a canner cow or whatever, they have more nutrients in them than what these young ones do. So it's just one thing after the other. You study cannibals and you find out that what they preferred most was the forearm down to the fingers, because that's the part of your body that stores the most nutrients, is closest to is the most use. So you find out with predators, if they're in good health, they eat the front quarters first. Everybody sells the hind quarter for a higher price. But a good, healthy animal, the front quarter, because there's more use in that area, hind quarters move an animal forward, and front quarter goes in and out, side to side in front. Now, I've taken a body out of that country, a human. That bear had eaten everything from the belt up. He left the jeans on, the shoes on, because they know where the nutrients. Now, if the nutrients are going out in the spring, all those predators are going to eat the hind quarters first, because that's the last place where nutrients are. So, if you start thinking of taking every animal of every age, their most appropriate, like active age humans, adults, they need to have the nutrition from active age mature animals. It matches perfectly across. So I don't think there should be culling. We shouldn't think of animals as one being prime and the other isn't. It's just a matter of allocating them those and letting the consumer know. The last thing I'll say is, you get mature animals, lots of good power in them, older clients, and we serve well over 300 customers a year. We always tell them, if you want to stave off Viagra for 10 years, you can do it. And that's true. It's no different than what the Indians say. So if we think of European models, we think about indigenous peoples, and what predators are, and then you come up with what's true nutrition. That's what I have to say.
That'll be the most interesting comments of the day. I'm going to let Chef Bradford, the professional chef up here, tackle that one.
I honestly don't know how to follow that. That is that wild card I think you were prepping me for. Yeah, I mean, that might be where we kind of stray away from the product marketing messaging and work on how, I mean, for me, it might be a little bit more of making it taste good with my culinary skill. But, I mean, and not to, I mean, I don't want to, downplay the value of what you said, because, I mean, it is really, there's a lot of truth to it. I mean, it's more of me as a consumer and bringing it to the plate. I guess there could be a challenge in telling that tale, but I mean, I'm up for a challenge.
I actually think you could have a really good idea, meaning that we can further differentiate the product by its age, and that there's value, so that, again, we're getting into product tiers, which is a good thing, having different products for different people, and that I think there's a marketing opportunity, not only from the nutrition side, but from, you want to call it the foodie side, that perhaps these older animals have higher concentration of flavor, perfect breed, the best bird, whatever it is. I think you have to think this way to think of how to market, what are new ways, and that there are opportunities. Aging is a classic signal for craft and premium in a lot of categories. Clearly wine, I think even some coffee, the roasting, how long it's been roasted, et cetera, et cetera. So it may be a place we need to look to as an industry.
One quick question for a show of hands. How many people in here have cull cows to market? What I thought. This has been an area that the Salt of the Earth folks have been trying to work on, and I never would have dreamed that this gentleman would have raised this question, because my marketing mind kind of goes on. There's a really interesting argument, for maybe you could utilize from a marketing standpoint. Very, very interesting. Anybody else want to tackle that one?
Next, I'm going to go out and trademark Giza Grassfed right after this.
I don't think you put it up close with them. I don't think I ever heard
I was going to go out and trademark Giza Grassfed right after we got here.
Okay, another more questions from the floor? There we go. Russ.
So my question, from a consumer perspective, what do you think there might be opportunities for an interest or preferences associated with things other than ribeye steaks? So whether it's burgers, organ meats, bones, etc. Interested in your comments.
Actually, we just ran our own internal data on this, trying to figure out, I'm sure Johnson was really times, what their best seller is. And I was a little taken back by how popular actually just plain old ground beef is. Just plain old ground beef, especially when it's a great superfood, right? You have the high omega-3s, the fat content can range from 85 to whatever, or leaner, but we still have the O3s, huge amount of protein. Really, we did a comparison with 4 ounces of our ground beef versus a Greek yogurt. And I would go choose the ground beef over the Greek yogurt. The difference in fat and calories was minimal, but there were so many other attributes. But those kind of things, now of course the consumer I am and I serve, they're feeding their families, etc. So ground beef's going to be a big seller. But I was taken aback by that cut in particular. And so now my decision going forward will be when I process, I'll actually take more into ground beef.
Yeah, I would completely agree. We have a huge demand for ground beef on the grass-fed side, huge. So it's easy. You can use it, in all kinds of recipes, and you can do so much with it. So it's not just a steak or not just a burger, and huge demand for that right now.
I would say that, I mean, my customers, they're looking for what's going to taste good, and we honestly can find and extract more flavor from higher impact mussels, and with slow wet cooking methods, and and there's a ton of things that you can do with ground, but I mean there's more fat content, there's more true flavor in it, and as a chef, I mean I love working with that because you're surprising people a lot more. I mean I think that there's a bit more that can be done to really promote these cuts, but I mean total utilization of the animal. I mean we're able to make steaks out of top butts that are wonderfly tender. I mean we're able to take rounds and turn it into barbecue that most people are only going to use either a brisket or they're going to, but I mean it's knowing that you can use more of the animal. I mean, in the offals, I mean, there's a completely untapped part. I mean, because there's there's a palatability thing about it, but I mean, there's more nutrient density in offals than than just about anywhere else, and the ability to make that taste good, and surprise the heck out of people is. I mean, I guess we're proud to do it, and want to continue on, making believers out of people.
Explain to the audience what the offals are. I mean, this audience, part of more general terms.
Well, I mean, your organ meats, and thymus gland, your hearts, liver. I mean, all of these are just loaded with nutrition. And sorry, I'm kind of talking in and out of the microphone, but there are so many applications, and and I would say that more of your all over Europe, you can maybe speak to it more in the Latin American countries. There is a lot more of a delicacy and a traditional consumption of offal meats, and it's part of the diet, and it's a great complement to overall health, where it's not just grabbing the tenderloin fillets and the ribeyes to eat, and what does that mean for a producer? I mean, they're not having to figure out, all right, what are we going to do with all this leftover? I mean, it's ready to be sold, and people want it. So.
There's this Brazilian dish called feijoada, and it's a black bean stew. And I don't know, how many of you have been to a Brazilian restaurant? All right, so I'm sure you've probably tried it, the black bean stew, yes? So in Brazil, originally you make that with all the leftover meats, and it's almost like for lack of a better word, the farmer's meal in Brazil. We call it the gaúcho, and it's the signature dish, and it's the most amazing dish, and it carries all those unused pieces. That here typically we would throw out, and I can pretty much say that most Brazilians, if they have a diet high in feijoada, I'm pretty sure they can pretty much kick anyone's ass because they're pretty intense. So it's definitely something that you maybe should probably start thinking in marketing as well. I mean, maybe not in these words, but probably find a more docile way of doing it.
I have to say something, or I don't have much to add to it.
I think we're pretty okay. We got one third in the back. Let's see. We got one right here.
If you're eating liver and you're can ski whatever 5 out of 7 days, 3 months in a row, you won't have to wear sunglasses because you got so much vitamin A in that liver. So just a note for who's ever skiing: you want to not wear sunglasses. eat liver.
It's like you've been skiing Jackson Hole.
Johnny, question, thank you.
Yeah, one of the things I do, I'm also in the Northeast. I'm in New York State, right on the Berkshire line. So I know what you're talking about, fragile customers, right? But what I've also found is in my marketing, I raise and market grass-fed beef and under a branded beef program. I try to do, and I'm assuming that you do, and the question is, how do you do it? But what I do is I try to know my customers as well as I possibly can so that I know how to target my marketing. I have certain chefs that I sell to who only want cattle that are over 5 years of age. And so how do you reach out and know your customers, because you're going to have a far larger customer base than I have. How do you know where to target your products and how to market those best? Because that's something that, it was a hurdle, it's no longer a hurdle in terms of marketing whole animals for me, and a lot of them. So how do you do it?
Well, I can speak. I mean, you're essentially running the grassroots of grass-fed. So in politics, we reached out, and I ran for U.S. Congress, so you have to reach out to any number of my 650,000 constituents. And the way we did that was purchasing email lists. It's annoying, but it works. I'm sure you guys get this, hey, give me $5, give me $10. I promise I'll rein in the size of government and close the board, whatever. But if you can buy these email lists for people in your region, and you can narrow them down to people who shop at high-end foods, and these people literally compile the credit card data to know that X number of customers in your area buy at Whole Foods. And then you send out, you buy 30,000 email addresses at a time, it costs you $2,000 to $5,000. Send out an email, say if you return this survey, you get 10%. People will respond to that, especially now with the prices the prices of beef greatly inflating. People are going to respond and say, hey, all right, this guy's offering me 10% off.
Really healthy grass-fed steak. All I have to do is tell them exactly what I want. And they'll get to know you, they'll build a relationship as a consumer. I work with a guy out in LA who does this for a living. His name's Steven. And I can give you his information. He does Allen Brothers. I'm sure you guys are all familiar with their dry-aged beef. But he does this professionally. He gets these email lists and he blasts out to whatever consumer it is. And he can get so specific with the emails that it will target almost 99% of the people will be interested in your product because of the target range. Does that kind of help you out a little bit?
Sure. I'm just curious, across the panel, how do you reach out to your customers, right? Because you're going to have a different scale customer base than I know every one of my customers. I might not know them personally, but I can see them visually and shake their hand when I drop off a whole beef at their restaurant.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time and effort on point of sale merchandise that we work with our customers. So if we're in a particular, say we're in H-E-B grocery stores throughout the Texas and northern Mexico area, we produce a lot of point of sale material, not about our brand, not about Premier Proteins, it's about grass-fed beef and the health benefits specifically on that one that we give to the grocery stores to put on their counters so they help them sell and move that product. So that's where our marketing dollars, almost like 95% of our marketing dollars go to, is to working with our restaurant chains or our grocery stores with point of sale material to give and to display at their meat counters to push the product. Again, because they're not selling our brand, nobody knows who we are, but they're selling grass-fed beef or they're selling, Berkshire hogs, and so it's all about the point of sale from our point of view that goes in the hands of the consumer. So the person who's walking by selecting that meal for that weekend, they're getting that message about the health benefits and why they should try this.
I can only speak to what we do, and we're direct to consumer. I'd say for us, the first thing we do is very, very tightly define who the consumer is, number one, because how can I reach them if I don't actually exactly know who I want to talk to? And in the marketing world, we call that segmentation. I don't want to talk to the world, I want to talk to you. And then I build my marketing plan around that. So for example, one thing we did last year, we are going after the soccer moms, etc., is we went in and did school fundraisers. So a lot of our schools, private schools, etc., have silent auctions, and so we participated, and that turned out to be a great marketing tool. Another thing we did is we actually partnered with a female-oriented company that does network marketing. It's a jewelry company. It's very popular. It's very high-end, but they do these parties, right? Whatever those Mary Kay parties, but it's for jewelry. And we partnered with them as a test because we knew actually when you looked at our customer demographics and segment, they were exactly the same. So that there could actually be a lot of synergies there. So we did a couple tests where we hosted joint parties with these ladies. And they've been hugely successul. And we got so many looks of craziness when we talked about that. But the fact of the matter is, our people we're talking to is the exact same. So there was opportunity for us to capitalize on somebody else's marketing and to partner with someone else who's trying to reach the same demographic. We called it Baubles and Beef. And so we'll continue to do that because it's successful. So, but part of what's helped us is tightly defining that customer so that we're not, going after people that don't fit with who we're trying to talk to. Doesn't mean they don't eat grass-fed beef, but we're going to tightly define who we're talking to and then get right at them through these very, very specialized, very localized marketing ideas.
And don't underestimate social media, which is huge now. I mean, Twitter and Facebook, especially Twitter. Facebook's kind of getting a little passe now, but Twitter, anything you're doing, just put, hashtag grass-fed beef, and somebody may look at something completely different, and they're going to get directed to your site or to your customer's site, and you link them in, and it's huge. And we've actually got a lot of business that we'd be able to pass on to our distributors, whoever, just because they saw a silly little tweet about something completely different, something silly like a little picture of us having a barbecue or one of our competition barbecue guys using a brisket that won, and then they'll come and pass it on, so it is able to huge marketing advantage.
Anybody else want to tackle that, or we'll go to the next question?
I'd say one new application out there is also Instagram. It's taking pictures of your product and tagging it, and tagging the heck out of it. And so for those who don't exactly know what I mean when I'm saying tagging, you're putting like a pound sign and a run-on word that basically is defining or helping other people find you. It's like, okay, take something like a concept like Sunday Fun Day. All right, well, that's okay. Well, we're having day drinks in the afternoon. Well, millions of people are having day drinks in the afternoon, and they're taking pictures of their Sunday Fun Day, and lo and behold, there comes your product in their feed, in their newsfeed. It's amazing how it works, but we do a ton of business through channels like Instagram and Twitter and crossing those. But just putting content out there. Content about what you do. Take a little video of your walk through your farm, and talk about it. Talk about what tell your story that way. So we also use constant contact for basically refreshing ourselves in our customers' minds. There might be somebody that we did business with 2-3 years ago, and all it takes is just kind of the right trigger to bring them back in, and and to kind of reintroduce your product to them. Something figuring out what's important to them. And constantly talking with your customers, and then have a very inexpensive, if almost no cost campaign to keep your customers in your sphere.
Next question.
John, real quick, if you guys have marketing questions, I've worked very closely with a marketing firm out, the one I spoke of in LA. I'd be happy to share his information with you, but this is what he does. He targets through social media, through internet, through subjective searches to find out which consumer. He can literally dial down to say, all right, who buys premium gas, shops at Whole Foods, and is not a vegetarian. And they can search that out for you, and it's relatively inexpensive. But marketing is, Google spends over $1 billion a year just on marketing. So I mean, marketing is an expensive part of any business. But if you're interested, I'd be happy to share any information with you afterwards with his contact info, and you can go from there.
We've got 6 minutes left. I'm going to answer this question back here in a second. Lady in the back room, I'm going to walk back here now. We've got 3 short announcements. Chef Bradford has brought about 100 packages of a paleo trail mix, and they're setting right at the back here. And you're welcome, right here by the back counter, you're welcome to pick one of those up. I actually carry those with me when I travel. That's outstanding. And Carl Higbie might have some books with him or not.
Did not bring books.
Okay, but if you look up carlhigbie.com, you can see Carl's book, which is Battle on the Home Front. And last but not least, I want to mention the kind of a ticklish subject. Paul over here thinks we're 5 or 6% of the market. NCBA spent several hours discussing the threat of the grass-fed industry at the recent national conference back in February. And it brings us to the point, I always said once we got to 5% of the market, we're going to be targeted. And I want you to target the Legal Defense Fund. Kathy Raymond here in the back is here today at this conference for the first time. And if you're not a member, I suggest you become a member, because there are things that will probably happen. I can't anticipate those. But there will be people in the commodity industry that do not want to see us succeed. I'm just going to be perfectly blunt about this. And there'll be Texas A&M has actually published some data about a year ago. It was in a national media publication. A very good friend, Dr. Eric Serrano, who's a medical doctor that teaches at Ohio State, K-State graduate. He went into the professional peer review literature and could not find the article, challenged the folks at Texas A&M, and they could never produce the documentation. So I think the Texas cattle feeders threw kind of a hand grenade at us to, they were trying to debunk the fact that grass-fed was high in omega-3 and CLA, and the grain-fed beef is similar the same. So those of you in the room that are marketing and have some exposure, I suggest you pay your dues to the Legal Defense Fund. It was founded, in fact, Ms. Raymond back here actually helped found that organization 5 or 6 years ago. It's kind of her idea. So it's a real low way to protect yourself. And I'm going to get a question right back here at the back. You got it. Go ahead.
No, it's really not a question. It's just kind of to the people who are direct marketing that we do a lot at farmers market and things like that. And people have been asking for the liver, the heart, and the tongue. And when I asked our processing plant this last go around for those organs, he looked at me kind of strange, because over the last 10 years, I've never asked for those parts. And they've always been thrown away. And it's amazing how many people are really wanting those parts. And I just kind of kicked myself to think that I was just letting them have them, or they were just going to waste when people really do want them.
I can tell you we sell a stunning amount of organ meats out of lamb, bison, and beef, and we cannot hard to keep them in stock. I actually buy some organs for a couple of my competitors in the grass-fed industry just so I can maintain that customer flow. But organ meats, get back to the comment about the Aborigines, Dr. Weston Price, the best teeth on the planet when he traveled the world in the 1940s was the Aborigines of Southwest Australia, and they had like 0.5% had a carie or a cavity. And those are the best teeth in the world. They had the highest consumption of organ meats on the planet. The second highest was the dairy cows that drank the glacial melt out of the Swiss Alps, and they were, I think, 2% cavities. And when those kids all went to the city, they fell into the same trap as everybody else. So organ meats are critical for your health. One more question? I think we're probably at the magic hour, 3:30. We've got a 30-minute break. You'll see our vendors. Let's give this crew a great round of applause.